Gary Leon Ridgway was born on February 18, 1949 in Salt Lake City, Utah, to parents Thomas and Mary Ridgway. He, his parents, and his brothers Gregory and Thomas would soon move to the state of Washington, living in an impoverished neighborhood near the SeaTac International Airport. His mother Mary was an overly controlling figure in the household. She frequently abused not only her children, but also her husband, Thomas, once breaking a plate over his head during an argument. As for Gary, he would often wet the bed as a child, leading to Mary humiliating him in front of the family before giving him a cold shower and washing his genitals. Mary would also tell him stories of her job at a department store, where she would often wear provocative clothing to arouse her male customers, sometimes describing the scent of their genital area to her son. Because of her behavior, Gary developed conflicting feelings of both anger and arousal towards his mother. Gary would struggle heavily in school due to him having both a low IQ and dyslexia, with his mother even threatening to have him placed in a mental institution. This is around the time that Gary would commit his first crime. At the age of 16, he lured a 6-year-old boy into the woods before stabbing him in the ribs, which punctured his liver. The boy would survive the attack, though Gary was never caught. He also purportedly began killing animals and setting fires at this time. Despite his poor school performance, Gary would graduate from Tyee High School in 1969. That same year, he married his girlfriend Claudia Craig and was later enlisted in the U.S. Navy to serve in the Vietnam War. During his service, he would start growing an obsession for prostitutes and would end up contracting gonorrhea. When Gary returned to the States 2 years later, he learned that Claudia had cheated on him while he was abroad, leading to their divorce soon after. In 1973, Gary was engaged to his second wife, Marcia Winslow, and had a son named Matthew. Their marriage would be filled with turmoil and discourse. In addition to his habit of soliciting prostitutes, Gary would take Marcia to secluded areas to have sex, including the banks of the Green River, and often demanded sex from her multiple times a day. At the same time, Gary became an evangelist, went door to door preaching the gospel, and insisted she follow the strict teachings of their church's pastor. Gary's mother also became involved in their marriage, controlling their finances and accusing Marcia of not properly taking care of Matthew. All of this led to the couple fighting often, with Marcia later stating that Gary placed her in a chokehold during one fight. The two would eventually divorce in 1980. On July 15, 1982, some children were playing near the Green River in King County when they discovered the body of a 16-year-old runaway named Wendy Lee Caulfield. She had been strangled with her own pair of jeans and her body was tossed into the river. A month later, 4 more bodies were found in the same river days apart from each other. 31-year-old Marcia Chapman, 23-year-old Deborah Bonner, 17-year-old Cynthia Hines, and 16-year-old Opal Mills. The discoveries of the bodies led to the formation of the Green River Task Force on August 16th, with the unknown culprit at the time being dubbed the Green River Killer. Over the next few years, dozens more bodies would continue to be found along the Green River and in the SeaTac area. Most of these victims were sex workers or runaway girls within the region, ranging in age from 12 to 31. They were usually found nude, some showing signs of sexual abuse, and were either left in secluded wooded areas or dumped in the Green River. With little to no evidence left at each of the scenes, it was extremely difficult for police to identify the killer. Gary was listed as a potential suspect in the murders early on in the investigation, thanks to his previous run-ins with law enforcement. In 1980, Gary was arrested for allegedly choking a prostitute. He claimed this was in self-defense after the woman bit him while performing oral sex. The case would ultimately be dropped. 2 years later, he was questioned by police after being seen driving his truck with another prostitute, Kelly McGinnis, riding in the passenger seat. She was later reported missing and is rumored to be one of Gary's victims. In 1983, a witness reported spotting him driving with another prostitute, Mary Malvar, who also went missing shortly afterwards. The following year, Gary attempted to solicit yet another prostitute who turned out to be an undercover cop. He was asked to take a polygraph test, which he agreed to and would end up passing. In 1985, at a Parents Without Partners event, Gary met Judith Mawson, who he would begin dating and eventually married 3 years later. Their marriage, in contrast with Gary's previous relationships, appeared to be happy and blissful. Judith saw him as a kind, respectful, and hardworking man, and she even seemed to get along well with his mother. Little did she know that her husband was a prime suspect to one of the deadliest ongoing killing sprees in the nation. By 1986, the body count for the Green River murders had reached over 40, and police were becoming desperate for solid leads. Dave Reichert, a lead detective in the case, would receive a letter from none other than notorious serial killer Ted Bundy, who at the time was awaiting execution at the Florida State Prison. Bundy also targeted young women primarily in Washington State, so he believed that he could be of assistance to the investigation team. He wrote to Reichert, "Don't ask me why I believe I'm an expert in this area. Just accept that I am and we'll start from there." Taking him up on his offer, Reichert and fellow investigator Robert Keppel flew to Florida to meet him, though Bundy would only talk to Reichert. He theorized that more bodies may be buried where the previous ones were discovered, and that the killer's residence would be close by. He also proposed that the killer may be returning to the corpses to copulate with them, and suggested detectives scope out these sites. In 1987, with a change of leadership in the Green River Task Force, priorities shifted to eliminating potential suspects and focusing on an A list, which Gary was still on. Looking at his work record revealed that on the days many of the victims went missing, Gary hadn't shown up to work. Sex workers in the area also gave a description of a man that matched Gary, who would be seen cruising through the strip where many of the victims were found. Police obtained a search warrant for his home on April 8th, where they took DNA samples and compared them to semen recovered from the bodies. However, since DNA analysis wasn't nearly as advanced at the time, police were unable to find enough evidence to link Gary to the murders. Despite millions of dollars being invested into the search for the Green River Killer, no new developments in the case would arise until 1999. In that time, technology and DNA analysis had advanced considerably, and the remains of an unknown body found near Green River were confirmed to belong to 19-year-old Tracy Ann Winston. This led to previous evidence being re-examined, which provided a DNA match for Gary. Paint samples gathered from the bodies also matched the paint Gary used for his job as a truck painter. On November 30th, 2001, nearly 2 decades after the first body was discovered, Gary Ridgway was arrested and charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of Marcia Chapman, Carol Christensen, Cynthia Hines, and Opal Mills. After more DNA analysis, 3 more victims were linked back to Gary: Deborah Bonner, Wendy Lee Caulfield, and Deborah Estes, and 3 more murder charges were added. In 2002, Gary's wife Judith filed for divorce. Initially, Gary pleaded his innocence to all the charges, but eventually agreed to a plea deal to have the death penalty dropped if he cooperated and provided information to authorities. He revealed the locations of where he killed and disposed of his victims, as well as how he carried out his murders. He mainly targeted sex workers, runaways, and other young women in the area because he knew they were less likely to be reported missing and less likely to be seeked out by police. He would lure his victims in with his friendly personality, and once showed a picture of his son Matthew to a victim to gain their trust. He even admitted to killing a victim while Matthew waited in his truck.
It was July 18th, I think it was my brother's birthday. That weekend I picked up a woman on back highway, and Matthew was next to me in the seat, and she hopped in and took her into an area, and my son was there, and I killed her. I'm real sure my son didn't see it, but that only happened one time.
Gary would typically take his victim either to his house or the woods to have intercourse, during which he would strangle them either with his hands or a rope, then dump the body in the river or the woods. Sometimes he would return to the scene to perform necrophilia on the corpse, claiming he did so to save money on prostitutes. Unlike most killers, who often exhibit rage and sadism with their killings, Gary was methodical and calculated. He was careful to leave as little evidence behind as possible, and spread out the locations of his victims to eliminate detectable patterns. Coupled with his otherwise normal lifestyle and unassuming demeanor, it was incredibly difficult for police to determine him as the Green River Killer. On December 18, 2003, Gary Ridgway was sentenced to 48 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Interviews with Gary revealed he confessed to killing as many as 70 people, and some speculate he may have killed even more. so his exact number of victims is unknown. At the time, he was recognized as the deadliest serial killer in the United States. On December 21, 2010, hikers traveling near the West Valley Highway in Auburn discovered an unknown skull that was near the location of where Mary Malvar's remains were found 7 years prior. The skull was later identified as belonging to 20-year-old Rebecca Marrero, who went missing in December 1982. In February 2011, Gary pled guilty to an additional count of first-degree murder, raising his sentence to 49 life sentences. Gary Ridgway is currently being held in the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla, occasionally being transferred back to King County to provide information on more potential victims. As of writing, the remains of 6 women suspected to be killed by Gary, including Kelly McGinnis, have yet to be found.